While she was alive.
While she was alive. But the route in Paris, which is going through, you know, the biggest, most famous roads in Paris, is it true to say that there is not one single second of video footage from any CCTV camera?
It is indeed, yeah. There are 10 known cameras that were lining the route that night. But they were all, now we know officially from the Lord Stevens report, that all of those cameras were pointing inwards towards the buildings that housed them. So none of them were pointing towards the road. So therefore allegedly we have no footage whatsoever of Diana's journey or of the crash itself.
There's one photo of Dodie with Diana. Would you say that that is a photo that was taken on the actual last fatal journey?
Yeah, that's a photo of them leaving the Ritz, yeah, I think. I would say so, yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about these photos by the paparazzi, because presumably that's been photographed from the back of a motorcycle.
Possibly, or by one of the paparazzi outside the Ritz when they left the Ritz that night.
Okay, so you would normally see a seatbelt going across somebody's shoulder because Diana's sitting in the rear seat, and therefore the seatbelt would be coming from here and going across. There's no seatbelt there.
No, we know for sure now that none of the occupants were wearing their seatbelts, which is odd really, but certainly in Diana's case it's very strange because the minute news of her death reached Britain, all of her closest friends started to say, you know, why wasn't she wearing a seatbelt? It had become a religion for her to wear a seatbelt. She always wore her seatbelt. It was an obsession for her. But now we know, strangely, from Lord Stevens' report, again, that Diana's seatbelt in particular was jammed in the retracted position. That is a quote, verbatim, from Lord Stevens' report. Diana's seatbelt, the rear right seatbelt, was jammed in the retracted position, so she was unable to put her seatbelt on. Even though the others may have been able to, she was unable to. So that's just an interesting point that's come out of the report. So that's just an interesting point that's come out of the report.
After Prince Eddie learned of the bloodthirsty campaign of murder unleashed by the Masonic monarchy and saw the horrific photos of Mary Kelly and her friends in newspapers, he had a nervous breakdown at Sandringham. Sandringham was the birthplace of Princess Diana. When Prince Eddie learned of the evil partial lobotomy performed on his young Catholic wife, it was the final nail in the coffin for his sanity. However, the Masonic murderers had not completed their task. Lord Salisbury, the Prime Minister, now ordered Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill to kill Prince Eddie's wife and also their illegitimate bastard child. Luckily, Annie Crook escaped into the hinterland of obscure poverty. She gave her child, Alice Crook, to the artist friend of Prince Eddie, Walter Sickert, who moved to Dieppe in France. A romance eventually developed, and Walter Sickert married the young Alice Crook. They eventually had a child, a baby son, who is Joseph Sickert, the man who kept the diaries of Inspector Abberline and the truth about the Jack the Ripper murders secret for 5 decades. Still, the devilish cover-up plan had not ended. Prince Eddie himself then became the victim of a royal conspiracy. The Earl of Strathmore, who owned the huge Glamis Castle, was employed to imprison young Prince Eddie. The royal family lied to the entire world and announced Prince Eddie's death on the 14th of January 1892, whilst secretly keeping him prisoner in hidden chambers at Balmoral and eventually later at Glamis Castle. Balmoral Castle sits by the River Dee, just north of Lochnagow, 9 miles west of Ballater. Balmoral has 25,000 private acres of forest and deer parks, all maintained at the public's expense. It was here at Balmoral, a Scottish stronghold standing nearly 1,000 feet above sea level, that was chosen as the place where Prince Eddie would be murdered. Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill and his coach driver, John Netley, were dispatched to Balmoral, where they pushed the young prince off a cliff. Amazingly, Prince Eddie survived the murder attempt and 2 days later crawled back to the gates of Balmoral, a shattered and broken man, the heir to the throne completely heartbroken at having his young wife lobotomized and separated from his only child. The 13th Earl of Strathmore made a pact with the royal family. In exchange for keeping Prince Eddie imprisoned at his Glamis Castle, one of his daughters would marry a future King of England. Glamis Castle has more than 100 rooms and many secret chambers. Shakespeare wrote about how Macbeth committed murder in the Great Hall. Glamis Castle is one of the most haunted places on Earth. On the floor of King Malcolm's room, there was an indelible blood stain which would not be washed away. The royal family eventually boarded the floor over. It was here, at Glamis Castle, that Prince Eddie, his spirit broken, was imprisoned for the rest of his life. He died eventually in 1933, 41 years after the royal family had officially proclaimed him dead. His mother, Queen Alexandra, visited Prince Eddie just once. She took a photo of her son and sent it to her sister, who was the Empress of Russia. For the first time on film, we can now see this photo, a picture of a broken-hearted man, imprisoned against his will, sitting alone in a small chamber, painting pictures which no one would ever see. Prince Eddie should have been king, but instead became a prisoner of the royal family. Rumours of a secret prisoner at Glamis Castle circulated amongst the staff for decades after. This was not the first time the royal aristocratic elite had imprisoned one of their own at Glamis Castle. According to official records, in October 1821, a son was born to the 11th Earl of Glamis. Because of royal inbreeding, the baby was hideously deformed. His parents, in a typically aristocratic, cruel manner, refused to announce the birth of their child as a future earl. Their son was badly deformed, resembling an egg with a hairy face and incredibly muscular arms. His parents illegally registered the baby as dead at birth. The son was never given an official name, even though he lived for more than 50 years, bricked up in a chamber, being fed via a slit in a stone wall. Rumours of the so-called Glamis monster persisted right up until the middle of the 20th century. The Glamis monster was in actual fact great uncle to Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. The pact made between the royal family and the Earl of Strathmore was eventually fulfilled. In exchange for illegally imprisoning young Prince Eddie, a daughter of one of the Earls of Strathmore would marry a future King of England. The girl born in 1900 and groomed to fulfill the pact was Elizabeth Marguerite, who married the future King George VI. King George's real name was Albert. He was Provisional Grand Master Mason of Middlesex and was installed as Grand Master of Scotland by a Masonic lodge which met from time to time at Glamis Castle. In 1936 he became king, and his wife became the beloved Queen Mother of Queen Elizabeth II. She recently died after several whole-body blood transfusions, and, unlike the death of Princess Diana, the Buckingham Palace flag was lowered to half-mast immediately following the Queen Mother's death. The Queen Mother, who had spent much of her childhood in the haunted halls of Glamis Castle, went to her grave with the royal spin machine in full swing, hiding the macabre secret to why she had been chosen as queen by King George VI. Their daughter, Elizabeth Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, whose family had invented the fake British name of Windsor to hide their German bloodline, was coronated in the bastardized version of King Solomon's occult ceremony at Westminster Abbey in 1953. The payoff for the Spencer-Churchill family was self-evident. Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill's son, Winston, was made Prime Minister, and in 2 generations to come, a Spencer girl, the young innocent virginal Diana, would be groomed from birth to serve the royal oligarchy and marry the bachelor Prince Charles. The legacy of the Jack the Ripper murders continued. The Spencer-Churchill family eventually received an immense payment from the newly formed National Lottery in Britain. Winston Churchill was theatrically trained by his father to give speeches in the House of Commons in the exact same fake statesman-like style his father, Lord Randolph Spencer Churchill, had used. In fact, some of the most important